Ba-da-ba-ba, everybody. Welcome to Everything Teams Phone Live, episode 79 with our friend and yours, Matt Carlson. How are you doing, Matt? Good to have you back.
Good. Thanks for having me back again.
Four with you. Brandon Bradley, how's it going? Bailey Smith, I know we've got stuff going on for sponsorship stuff. You can cover all that amazing stuff that you do so well and keep us on track. I just want everybody to know really quickly. Bailey sets up these shows for us, right? And she preps our audience with the notifications in LinkedIn. She preps our guest speaker. She preps us for content and for the things that we're supposed to cover, and then organizes it all and keeps us in sync and on track, which is why, Bailey, special thank you to you today. This is probably nearly 20th episode or so that you've produced for us, and we've just got infinitely better over the last few months that you've been doing this for us. So thank you very much, Bailey.
Well, thank you. Thank you.
All right.
It's sentimental this the week before Thanksgiving, huh?
You know, there you go. Brandon, I'm excited it's a Friday. Are you excited it's Friday?
Oh, yeah. And it's like, speaking of, week before Thanksgiving, let the craziness begin, right? Between holiday planning, and Rick, you and I, we're off to London for Cavell, Enable, I think it is, on December 3rd. So any of our over the pond listeners and friends and partners, looking forward to seeing you guys December 3rd in London.
Yeah. We will see you there. So Matt, we're going to get to the why. This is the episode I've been waiting for, really. It's to get to the why. It's like, you've done all this work. You've deployed this massive organization, and you've done it 3 times now. This is your third, and you were rolling things out. You were taking feedback from your immediate feedback. We've gone through the cut already, essentially, if you will, and you're rolling some offices over. And, last week you gave us test plans. If you listeners, if you did not request the test plan and the persona mapping documentation last time, ask us for it, because Bailey's got it down there, or go down there and download it. But these are tools that Matt has given us. They're free tools for you. Just go download it. It's nice to have when you're doing a deployment like that. So that's excellent stuff. I was going to get into some more discussion really quickly, but I know, Bailey, you've got some stuff to get out of the way.
Yep, sure do. You guys know this podcast is sponsored by Momentum, where we help businesses connect, collaborate, and engage using Microsoft Teams. Now back to you guys. That was a
payday. Bam. All right. So, thank you, Bailey. Okay. Really, what I wanted to get to, Matt, was you're in the middle of deploying all that stuff, but I wanted to talk about something I saw last week in a post on LinkedIn. It was pretty interesting. So Teams is coming out with, and Brandon, I don't know if you saw this or not, but Teams is coming out with, like, oh gosh, how could I say? I've got to go back and look at the post, but basically, I'll call it open APIs or something for third-party ISVs to be more deeply integrated. I'm going to actually go find that, because I thought that was a pretty...
Yeah, I think what you're talking about is the context-based or contextual-based calling, where now when you get that Teams call and it pops up the window, it used to be just I'm going to call it empty space. No offense to the people who liked seeing people's avatars and whatnot sitting there on that screen without the video on. But yeah, it'll be where you can start to integrate into that calling window, so that the context, you don't have to leave. Like, example would be, probably the big one would be screen pop, right? Instead of a separate browser opening up for screen pop, we'll be able to bring that screen pop right into the context of that call.
And that is really cool, because Brandon, you and I know we've done this. In fact, I think I'm speaking on it in London. It's called I think my panel is something called Collaboration 3.0, or what's next in collaboration, something like that, right? And we've talked about this a lot, Brandon. So Matt, this is ultimately going to be directed at you in a moment here. Yeah. But what's next, right? And we talked about deep integration with vertical-based solutions, right? Because I look at this and I go, what makes voice better these days? What makes voice more interesting? And I said on a post, Twilio did that early on, right, with APIs and lots of messaging and stuff like that, where tech forward thinking companies were adopting the API sort of model and doing cool things. I think of Uber or Lyft or something like that, where it's like a text goes out, a phone call comes in, whatever it may be, right? Those sorts of things. But your normal phone guys, right? They're not, some of them are adopting some pieces of Twilio, but really not, right? So for those organizations that are out there that are team centric, being able to, have sort of this context sort of thing open, this contextual information open, you can go build to this, whatever vertical platform you want to build to, because ultimately the workflow is what's important, right? What's happening for this lawyer? What's happening for this doctor? What's happening for this, fun park? What's happening for these different types of organizations, and what's important to them in their daily lives? Because voice, and I even said this in a post, is like, we've been preaching that voice at some point is going to be just an app, right? Now voice is big. It's very, it's critical to lots and lots of businesses, but it is becoming more and more of an app, right? Like, the whole collaboration experiences has replaced sort of a lot of voice. So it's interesting to me. I think that's going to be really cool to start building in voice into some sort of a workflow. And it's just a workflow now and just an app. So anyway, Matt, what do you think? Did you see that contextual sort of text thing pop up for Teams? What are your thoughts on there? Do you guys do anything really advanced in the team space from an ISV perspective, maybe?
No, not today. Not today, but I do like that type of innovation coming out. I think for me, it really, in a good way, starts to blur the line between like a full-fledged call center, management application versus what you have just first party, natively in Teams, which I think really helps, because I think, like you said, how voice becomes more of an app, that voice workflow, I think, really starts to lean off of the traditional voice experience and more into like that collaboration experience. And I think, with those types of innovations where you can start having, natively screen pop, some type of CRM or help desk solution or something like that, I think blurs that line in a good way, where it's not so extensively, so much overhead with, these call center systems, and now, hey, look, you're already using this Teams app, for your other collaboration. Now let's start building on that even more, right? So I'm excited for it.
Yeah, and I think it also is going to open the door for at least the ISV side, like a momentum type company, to be a little more creative in how we integrate into customer environments. As an example, I'm just thinking about this context, right? Where today, you can do a screen pop with Teams, but it's a URL, it's limited in functionality. Yeah. You can get quite a bit done with that in the traditional sense, but I'm thinking, okay, true context would, in my mind, involve context switching at the same time. So I get that call, it pops up. Maybe my profile is set up in a way that I'm a support person, and it's going to pop maybe the CRM first to show relevant tickets or cases for the customer. But I'm also imagining, I've managed support teams in previous lifetimes where that support person maybe also needs reference to a CRM integration that tells them this is what the customer has purchased, this is what their services are. So the ability to do context switching, where I might be a support person who cares about my tickets first, but I have the ability to click, maybe it's just one click in that same call window that shows, hey, here's your customer profile, here's what they have, here's how you can better serve them. Maybe it's, a lot of companies out there might be, hey, this is a white glove platinum status customer that, needs to immediately get escalated off to something. And you can just start to tightly wrap that into one, screen, so to speak, so that person can just work right out of that context.
Yeah. And if you think too, like coming up, like as you start to develop these things, think how much deeper the integration could get in the future, right? So not only are you having the screen pop, but now, potentially something like Copilot could summarize the call, put all the details in that CRM directly, and take out that that manual, the agent sitting there summarizing their call, copying, pasting it into the CRM, documenting, what was talked about. So I look forward to the future of what even deeper integrations like that could offer.
Well, let me ask this. I mean, in the name of what? Like in the we sit here, like I told you guys over the last weekend, I was sitting down like messing around with Copilot Studios and Power Automate and working on support ticket enhancement and all that stuff. What in the name of is it just like Uber productivity? Is it in the name of, cost savings? Like, what are your thoughts, Matt, from an enterprise perspective? Like, what would you see this as? Why do you take on, additional sort of services and features and products and layer them into into your, portfolio of things that you're deploying? What's the driver behind those things typically?
Yeah, so from a business perspective, of course, efficiency, cost savings, things of that nature. There's KPIs that are measured that would potentially see a benefit from these types of enhancements and innovation. From an and I also like to look at it from an end user point of view as well. I'm not tied down, bogged down with these medial tasks, where I'm just typing away like every call. Okay, we talked about this, those repetitive things, I think also can help impact just job satisfaction, maybe even, right? I can focus more on challenging things. We talked about upskilling in the past, like that could potentially flow down to even these types of positions, not just on the administrative side, right? But also on the end user side of how we're using the technology. I don't have to worry about these small tasks anymore, the boring ones, right? Now I'm like more into problem solving type tasks and things of those nature that I can hand off those easy ones, and now I've potentially have more satisfying job duties.
I'm gonna tease Rick's imagination for a minute with this whole idea, because I've been thinking about this as you've been talking, Matt, and I don't know if that this is necessarily on the roadmap today with Microsoft, but maybe it is, and maybe it's a future thing. But how many times have we been mobile traveling, right? Matt, you mentioned you were traveling last week. Rick, you and I, obviously we travel quite a bit. How often have you got that Teams call and you answer it, and it's, who knows, could be a partner, could be a vendor, could be a customer, and the conversation starts in, and all of a sudden you're like, man, I wish I could look this up for you, customer, but A, I got an app switch, or B, I don't have, maybe it's Salesforce, maybe it's something else. I don't have that on my phone. How nice would it be? This is probably fringe use case, but there's a huge Salesforce out there that's always mobile. How nice would it be to have a mobile friendly version of that context? So you take that call and you can at least get like cliff notes, so to speak, on whoever you're talking to. So it helps you, or I'm thinking like iOS, Apple CarPlay or Android mobile or auto, where maybe you're in the car and you get, those highlights where you can just glance over and say, oh, yeah, I remember we were talking about this.
Well, here's what's interesting about that, Brandon. I think that, we reserve all of those cool features for contact center workers typically, right? Support centers, contact centers, things like that. But when you have it, and that's not the case when you think about, let's say, Momentum, where everyone's in Salesforce. It's an example, right? Everybody's got a Salesforce account for the most part, right? So you look at that and you go, how nice would it be? I got a call this morning I couldn't get to. I saw it ringing on my mobile phone. I couldn't get to it. It was a Northwest local number. It would be cool if I could, if automatically it dipped into Salesforce and said, oh, this was, Brad Smith at XYZ Corp or something like that. And I get the Salesforce information, or even better yet, here's my Salesforce and here's my Outlook. If there's an email that's associated with it, or if I can do a get retrieve from my Outlook in case that number pops up and I can see what emails I've got that are associated with that phone number. That sort of stuff would be kind of cool to the normal user, right? To the normal person, because I go, look, I'm busy doing something, but if it's something that I really need to take, let me grab it, right? Let me make sure that this partner or customer is happy, right? Before I, finish my breakfast, you know what I mean? I'll take the call. So that'd be kind of cool for everybody to have access to instant information regarding whatever they're getting in. Pretty cool.
And I don't think it's too far fetched either, because if you look at Outlook, right? I mean, you schedule a meeting or you get an email. I think it's like all the way down at the bottom. It's like, relevant other emails from this person, or files that were shared between you and this other person that you're emailing with. That this would potentially be just an extension now, merging over into like the actual external dialing piece. So yeah, it'd be interesting.
That'd be pretty cool, right? Because then you like think about it the way that Matt, if someone calls you up and you're like, okay, you don't see who it is automatically, and on the number, but you got this, and it's a vendor, or it's not a vendor, it's a salesperson that's called you 1,000 times. You're like, dude, I'm not going to call you back, man. I'm sorry. You just figured that out, but seriously, like it'd be nice to know that, ahead of time. And I don't know how many vendor calls you get, but you probably pick up the phone every now and go,
I think the big problem there, though, Rick, is that's pre-call versus post-answer, right? In order for that context, I think today you're gonna get it as soon as you answer. Because I was thinking, man, the shared calling would be a great scenario for that, but it would have to be a you'd have to pop a notification to each person pre-answering the call. And that might be useful in that, to your point, who's calling. You might get a quick reference. I need to be the one to take this call. But unfortunately, I think phase one is you got to answer the call, and then the screen pop, and then it's probably too late. You're like, I shouldn't have answered that, or
Dang, I am talking pre-call. Then I was actually just looking at the notice.
I redact that.
I was looking at I was checking your work, Brandon, because I was looking at the notice and going, is it post call? Is it going to be?
I have the call window open.
You're right. Didn't mean to doubt. I didn't mean to doubt.
Hey, I'm only here.
All right, so Matt, let's do this. Matt, let's dive into post migration here. You've moved the customers. Two things. From an administrator perspective, are you happy now? Right? How do you feel? And two, from an end user perspective, immediate feedback, both sides. I'm looking for not right now post migration that you've done all this 3 times. I'm talking about, day 5 after some migration. How are you feeling? How are the end users feeling?
Yeah, no, it's good. So yeah, from an administrative side, I mean, just think about, deploying in the past, deploying 5 or 10,000, phone lines. What would that, not only programming the extensions, but deploying the hardware, right? Where you had all of that field work that had to be done. So from an admin perspective, I mean, the benefits are immediate. I mean, we just, overnight, right, deployed 5,000, 2,500, however many phone lines directly to the end users for almost immediate use, right? I mean, you got that Microsoft minute, lag time to deal with, but otherwise it's immediately available to them. So I mean, that's just a huge obvious one right there. Secondly, from an admin perspective, right, troubleshooting and monitoring is awesome, right? I mean, you can do it all right away. I mean, it's just a little bit of scripting that you got to do, and you can not only monitor but also ensure that things went the way you expected them to go. There's some great, really detailed analytics that you can really get into in the call, call analytics within the Teams admin center, that you can really dive in, if you did need to troubleshoot a problem. So like those are just immediate benefits that that you see right away, day one, right? From an end user perspective, similar, they see similar outcomes as well. So I mean, you're going to have your thorns every now and then, but for the most part, these guys, they start using their phone day 1 or day 2, and they're already, the benefit of already having used Teams previously and then stacking phone on top of that is that the call interface is identical to a meeting, right? So your window pops, we don't have the cool screen pop yet, like that we were just talking about, but the window pops open, right? And you got your call controls on the top right. They're already familiar with those. They know how to mute. You're only adding a couple extra things on there, transferring, some of those things. So the familiarity is already there, and they can kind of hit the ground running and just start using it right away. So and then everything else is pretty intuitive as well. So things like voicemail, right? You can look at it, and a lot of people with other phone systems were used to be able to check their voicemail with email. Great, that's still there today, right? You can check your email. You can see the transcription, hear the recording, just like you could with any other call center or call manager they may have had in the past. But also, it's right there in the Teams app where you're expecting it to be, right? So those are all like immediate benefits that we've seen.
So what I've heard, this is what I think about again from I kind of come at things a bit differently. Like I get like this business owner's sort of like perspective every now and then. So what I heard, Matt, is that you and maybe a smaller team are capable of deploying way more, and therefore it's going to save me. Let's just say business owner, or financial owner here. It's going to save me money in FTEs essentially, or lots and lots of other consulting fees, outsourced consulting fees, because it's a tighter, smaller group that can go roll a larger amount of services out. Is that?
Yeah, 100%. Yep.
That's awesome. That's an immediate like financial impact that you end up seeing, right? Like that's a real valuable cost savings benefit that is realized right away. What's one that you didn't expect that you did find out? You're like, oh, didn't even expect this as a win, but boy, it is.
Shoot, I don't know. You got me on that one.
You just knew it was good. I knew. I've done this 3 times. I've already known it's good all the way around. Like you should just do it, everyone. All right. Brandon, any technical things on that?
I mean, from my perspective, I think one that probably, this is just me having been out and socializing with others, that probably doesn't get talked about a whole lot. And it really does depend on probably what kind of Microsoft licensing you have, like E3 versus E5. But one that I think is often maybe not overlooked, but just not socialized is the way that you put compliance around your third-party platforms. It simplifies all that. It simplifies your security stack. It simplifies your device management, your conditional access policies, because now you're leaning into, once you've made that migration, either you're realizing a security benefit because you're a third-party on-prem system that really doesn't have integration, and so it's just kind of on an island of its own. It's subject to the traditional SIP PBX credential hacks and stuffing and all that stuff, to now you're bringing this into an already, usually, especially in the large enterprise, an already well-defined security practice, and then wrapping around things like device management for compliance purposes. So I think that's a huge efficiency gain in some ways. Yes, it can be, you can stub your toe on it initially because you don't take into account like, I've got this new Teams phone and it won't sign in. Why won't it? Well, yeah, you got to take those considerations around, conditional access. But I think the big picture story is it's a huge security gain and management gain for, now it's one platform, one system for kind of that whole collaboration experience.
Yeah, I would echo that. Yeah, it's definitely not only the security gain, but also the ability to be flexible with it as well. So, you can create conditional access policies that are tailored to your specific needs, whereas, you didn't have that type of flexibility potentially in the past, right? You had to have a VPN box at home to plug in your phone or something like that, like, something crazy or complex and impossible to manage. But yeah. So I think the security gains is definitely a big one.
Yeah, I mean, I came from a big corporation in a previous life that you wanted a phone on your desk at home because you were working from home 2 days a week. They would ship you the Cisco Meraki because you're going to tunnel all of that back through. So that's a huge expense when you're talking about thousands of employees that potentially have the flexibility to work from home. This was kind of pre where, soft phone was still kind of the assumed first piece, but it still was kind of an era where it's like, well, I still want my phone. So they're shipping you an extra phone, and they're shipping you, like you said, some kind of VPN tunneling device, security appliance to backhaul you back into on-prem data centers for that phone to register through. Whereas Microsoft is internet first designed with all the security already built in up front.
It sounds like a long time ago, but think of how long that stuff has been perpetuated at large companies because it's so difficult to move. So yeah, I mean, even though it seems like, man, why are we still doing that? Like, it's still out there. I know it's still out there for from my firsthand experience. So just another way to modernize and optimize.
Mm-hmm.
Question for you, Matt. So let's go. I want to take you back for just a second, either pre-move or post-move. How important were Microsoft Teams has this, and I'm not super familiar with it, but it's like the site tester, let me test the bandwidth at each site and see if each site is prepared, my network is prepared. How important was that? And then post, how important were the call quality dashboards? And I know, Brandon, I think I want to just tie that into the new call quality dashboards, Brandon, that you've been working with. I'm curious if Matt's kind of dove into those at all as well. So maybe let's start with that stuff, the site stuff.
Yeah, so I think it's called, was it the network assessment tool or something like
network
that?
Yes.
Assessment, network planner.
Yep. So yeah, those are super critical, but more so from just an overall collaboration, from the overall team stack in general. So before we were adding the voice workload, it was looking at it just from an overall video conferencing, messaging standpoint, making sure we had the bandwidth and all that good stuff. So definitely critical. We didn't revisit it too much. We did slightly. Typically, that's already been assessed, and adding the voice workload is not like you're not like usually doubling or you're tripling your bandwidth or anything of that nature. With all the video bandwidth going back and forth, I mean that's hogging up the majority of it, right? So we felt comfortable, that there was plenty there. We did a reassess somewhat, but not like a full reassessment there. And then to jump into the quality, what are they called? Like the quality experience reports now, or QER? Did they rebrand them? I think.
Yeah, QER is part of the CQD. Yep, and that's
part of the CQD.
Yeah,
okay, yeah.
And I think QER is kind of the main one, right? The quality experience report that kind of maps out anything from audio to video streams to if you're using even like VDI environments or VPN connections that Microsoft has visibility to. Yeah, it gets really granular how deep into the weeds you can get with it.
I would recommend having somebody. This is a big one that I've come across in every organization. I would recommend having somebody internally owning that report and really taking advantage of what it has to offer, and look at it from. I mean, voice is obviously going to be a critical for this project, but there's so much data in there, and it's really good, but it's sometimes overwhelming. I'd love to see Copilot come in here and start making that easier. So,
well,
Microsoft is listening. Yeah, like
actually, and I'm gonna put the link. Well, I will, or I'll have Bailey do it. I'm gonna put the link down below to the download where you can download the CQD dashboard that has QER.
Yeah.
The newest version 8, that just shipped in October, is I think what you're saying, Matt. I think Microsoft is already headed there, because what you'll see as you read about it is they're using I'm not going to say it's Copilot, but they're using some kind of ML language model to analyze that data to start directing you towards, hey, this is where the source of the problem is at, down to could be, you and I are talking and all of a sudden maybe your video goes, all pixelated on me, and that QER dashboard can get me down to the point of, hey, we think it's actually the access point that Matt's sitting on.
Yeah.
So I don't know that there's a way to I shouldn't say I don't know. To my knowledge, there's no way now. The Power BI has a Copilot plugin, so maybe you can ask it some questions. But the report itself doesn't have a way to prompt for you. You would
No.
have to still
Yeah.
understand this is what the data is telling me. It would be interesting to hook it to Copilot to see if you could ask Copilot, some prompting questions. I just don't know how deep it would be able to get into that data.
Yeah, it is interesting, but just going back to the overall report, highly recommend having somebody on your team owning that that whole process. Not only from the call quality dashboards and the QER, but also making sure that you like your telecom engineers, we talked about upskilling, make sure they know how to log in. For some of these guys, in my experience, they've never logged into the Teams admin center before, right? Before this project, right? So make sure that they get the upskilling that they need, and then also spend a lot of time, come up with mock, tickets, and pretend like, hey, Matt had a bad time on a call. Where do we get the data from, right? Where do we go first? Is it Teams admin center and then look at call analytics? Is it the call quality dashboard and start looking for more patterns and trends over time with maybe not just Matt, but let's look at the subnet he was on, or let's start really understanding from top to bottom what that looks like, because that was a big learning curve for every project that I've done. Is these enterprise size people want to see where are my patterns, not just individual people. You have these VIPs that we really need to dive deep into just them, but also where are the patterns that we're seeing problems, and the data is there. Trust me, it's there, because there's too much data there sometimes. So that's where it really requires somebody to own the report, understand it, ask your partners for help, Microsoft, whoever, and really get good experience using that, because that'll be a big win for you.
Yeah, and I would just add one thing to that, Matt, and that's making sure that whoever is that team that's doing the Teams admin portion of calling or meetings or whatever, if you're going to leverage the full potential of CQD and QER, setting up those tags correctly in the Teams admin center so that you can start to identify buildings and sites.
Yeah.
And otherwise you're going to open up the dashboard and you're going to see a bunch of subnets, and maybe your team knows, like, oh, well, I know that's building A over in New York, but maybe they don't, right? Maybe it's, you can start to define these location tags where you enrich the data even beyond what Microsoft has, at least in the CQD reports. And it just makes that experience so much more intuitive as you're drilling through that data. And a couple things I can appreciate about it already, just the little bit I've used it, is Microsoft does enrich some of that data. Like they'll tell you, like, let's say you have this poor quality, I can drill down and see what ISP you're on, right? Charter, Spectrum, whoever. And I can quickly, like you said, maybe today you're on Charter and tomorrow you're on, Comcast, and I can see that difference and go, hey, Matt, what's going on, where are you sitting that it's Charter versus Comcast? And, just those basic questions can solve problems really quickly, or at least isolate the problem very quickly.
Yeah. Also, things that we didn't have to worry about before, that now being in Teams that you have to worry about, but the data is there. What Teams client version are you on? Are you on like a really outdated one? I've seen that before too. I mean, like way outdated. It's like, how are you running this still? So even things like that, because I think there's a user details page, right? It tells you the different clients that they're logging in from and they're using. You can see if it's iOS or Windows version, whatever. That's where I said, like, really have somebody own that report from top to bottom, understand the data that's there, understand how it can be used, and what to look for in your patterns, right? Let's find patterns of bad call history. There's a lot of good overview pages there, and then there's also a lot of like really drill into the details of a user, right? So
That's good stuff.
Yeah, and I know it's come in handy in environments where companies outsource contact centers, and all of a sudden customers are complaining about, man, every time I call your contact center, it's just garbage experience, and the ability just to even go to the map tab and see this global map, and you can quickly see, oh man, this country, maybe I'm outsourced in 3 different countries, and I can immediately see, well, this country is red. Why? And maybe it's, that subsea cable, maybe it's something else, but at least you can very quickly go, we need to make a change.
Yeah. And that's that's part of that immediate benefit that we talked about earlier, or that you asked about, Rick. So like, being able to have that amount of data. I mean, it's just, I can't overstate how much data is there. It's so much. It is crucial, right? I mean, you've got a new phone system, and now look how much data we have. Like before, you could trace the call, right? But you can do a Wireshark or something, but it's not going to give you the level of detail that this now has. I mean, it's a lot, but really good though. A lot of value add.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. I think that.
Go ahead, Brandon.
My last thought is back to the immediate value. Rick, you had originally asked, what is that immediate value? And I want to echo what you just said, Matt, that I think CQD is something that not many organizations are aware of. And it's important to socialize it, because to your point, that data, if you're just pulling that data out of TAC, sometimes it might be a little confusing, or it's disjointed in a sense that sometimes you got to go to the user to get certain log data. Sometimes you got to go to PSTN usage. Sometimes you got to go somewhere else. So having a centralized spot where, especially if you're coming off on-prem, to your point, where I can do a call trace, but I don't really have visibility into what the ISP is in the country of Philippines or whatever.
Yeah.
But it could also be overwhelming if you're not prepared, right? So maybe that ties back into, like you said, that upskilling, and part of the preparing to move to Teams Phone is making sure you've got people who are aware of, hey, you're going to have access to all this data, so let's make sure we start understanding how to use the data, so that on day one we can realize the true benefit of that, versus I'll call that proactive versus reactive response to the data.
Yeah. But I want to take this back to the end user for just a second. So Matt, when you're polling your end users, you've moved massive amounts of people over. When you're polling your end users, are you sending them out a survey? Like, how do you poll so many end users at one time? That's number one. Number two, when you are deploying, let's say you've done the whole massive migration, and now you're onboarding net new people to the organization, let's just say, do you have an automated workflow that's tied into anything, that automates some of this stuff for you?
Yeah. So as getting user feedback, we mentioned it before. I try to be really careful with the surveys. I mean, I think we all probably don't like them, but we get so many of them. So I do try to be careful with those. Not to say that don't do them, but because I certainly have, keep it super brief. Make sure you really sit down with the team and understand, what is the MVP for this survey? What's the minimum amount of information that we need that would give us the most value? Because we want to be cognizant of the end user's time and value, the input that they do give. We don't want to get into tons of detail. So I try to keep mine, even as short as 5 questions, right? How was your overall experience? Were you aware that it was coming? Did we provide enough detail? Do you have any additional feedback? Did you have any problems? Things like that, like super high level.
I will echo short. This isn't intended to be a knock on Momentum, but Momentum not often, but occasionally sends out internal surveys where they kind of, maybe it's going into a Q1, Q2, whatever review, and all hands, all company call, and they send out a survey, and I'll start the survey. And by the time I get to question 7, I'm like, this is stupid. No offense to the Momentum person if they're listening.
No one's listening.
But everyone wants to, as you're out consuming services, right? Everybody wants you to fill out a survey. Doesn't matter if it's in your personal life or in your professional life. So survey monotony gets really heavy really fast unless you keep it really short. And I'm going to tie that back to I now have an appreciation for every time I end a meeting or a call and Teams is prompting you for the 5-star review. I ignored that because for the longest time I thought it was just Microsoft wanting to know that data, but now seeing it as reportable data in CQD,
yeah.
That's massive.
Yeah, it is.
So for me, I think what I would do is I would take what you're saying, that 4 or 5 question survey for initial deployment, rollout, what's your experience been, and maybe even follow up of how's your experience been. But more than anything, I think I would start incentivizing my employees to, hey, when you end a meeting or a call, it takes you, 3 seconds to click that button. And with CQD, you could almost do like raffles and stuff or giveaways to start encouraging your users to report, user feedback based data so that you can start to see that start to populate in your reporting, because that may be more valuable than the occasional 5-question survey potentially in the long term. So just my thoughts.
Yeah,
I didn't know. I love that.
Yeah, I think it's a balancing act. You don't necessarily want to incentivize like good answers just for the sake of submitting.
No. I don't mean good. I just mean like, hey, we're gonna see that. Hey, we see that. If I drill down to your user, you've done this 800 times in the last month. That's 800 entries into a drawing or whatever. You know what I'm saying?
Matt,
like not just a 5-star review.
It's back to Matt's positive messaging from like episode 2 or 1 or whatever. And it's like we're really taking a look at this new system. We're really like, we want to make sure that you're super happy with it. Like, make sure you fill out this thing every time, every call for the next 60 days. We want to make sure that every experience is correct.
Yeah, I think just a final thought on the survey too. I already said like be very methodical in the questions that you're asking, but also it works the opposite way too. If you're asking certain questions, be careful what you ask for, because you need to have a plan to do something with that data, which may require follow-ups and things of that nature. So I would just be methodical in what you're asking and what you're expecting the outcome to be from the replies.
Got it. So Matt, you had the questions that you asked, the 4 or 5 questions that you say, the survey stuff, you had those like you were like Johnny on the spot with those things. So is that the messaging? Are those essentially the questions that you do send out?
Yeah, some flavor of those.
Got it.
We're going to have to give Matt a second. It sounds like he's got his speaker suddenly feeding back on him.
Let me check.
Does he? I thought he was all right.
I could hear some echo there for a second.
Oh, gotcha. Because that was totally different than what I thought, I would send out as an example, right, Matt? Yours was very high level, like almost like theoretical, where I'm just like, listen, can you make a call? Can you get a call? Can you check your voicemail? Are you good? That kind of thing. But you're right, though. And those questions that I'm asking do invite responses that I may have to go back and train on, or may have to go back and do something on. I've got to be prepared for those things. Where yours seem very sort of not theoretical, but sort of, real sort of generalized topics like, are you good? Did you know the transition was happening? That sort of thing.
Yeah. So just be careful with what you ask for.
Yeah, we'll have to get those questions from you. I think that's really good follow-up. It's like, it'd be nice to share those questions. Like if you have just those sample questions, maybe we'll put those down in the comments below. Maybe Bailey can drop those in the bottom. I think that'd be helpful for organizations.
I think there's probably value in both types of questions though, Rick. Like the kinds of questions you were saying, like, can you make a call? Can you receive a call? Can you transfer a call? That's more like end user acceptance type survey. And the value there may be, hey, instead of waiting for you to complain, and make it optional, right? But hey, here's the 5 things that we're hoping you can go do. Can you test it? Can you let us know? And maybe in that survey, you then integrate that into a ticketing system. And if the answer is no, you pop a ticket on that user and you go work the issue. And, again, being proactive versus reactive, but again, not making the user feel like they have to take the survey or they feel penalized if they don't take the survey.
Yeah.
Well,
You can get creative too. I mean, you could, send out your super short survey to, everybody or a subset. I've also done things too where I've looked up how many people, who are my top 25 people, 50, 100 people making the most calls. And then just informally reaching out, hey, I see that you use the service a lot. Not that we're spying on you or anything, but you use it a lot. Would you be willing to like answer a more in-depth survey, right? Or like give some more in-depth feedback so those people, those power users, be friendly about it. And hey, like, also I think we talked about this, but whatever your more broad, like enterprise-wide communication or collaboration platform is, make a community for voice, for Teams voice. So, if you're using Viva Engage or if you're using Slack or whatever you're doing, make that community. I always try to like plug it in everything that I do. So like our landing page, hey, make sure you join this community. Our email surveys down at the bottom, hey, if you got further questions or feedback, join this community. So, create some type of community where folks can proactively come in and what you start seeing is that other people in the community will eventually start answering questions for you, right? Because it becomes a community of practice. So a bunch of people are there talking about the service, and other people are like, oh yeah, I had that, and they answer it for you. Now Matt doesn't have to do that, right? So foster that community of practice.
Matt, I'm just going to pick on you for just a second, Matt, because you said we're on a Teams call and transitioning to Teams here, and we're talking
Oh,
Teams phone,
look,
Matt.
I know,
And you just said the
I know.
S word. You said the S word, Matt. Slack.
I know
I'm
a
like,
lot
what?
of people are still on Slack. I won't. We'll have another meeting about getting off of. We'll have another series about getting off of Slack.
That's an interesting one. That's actually quite interesting because you do have the customers who are very Slack pro Slack, right? They're really stubborn
You got to
when it comes
infiltrate
to
from
Slack.
within.
Yeah.
You've got to infiltrate from within, right? Or bringing them down from inside, or however that saying goes, right?
That's hilarious. That's like a few weeks ago, man. That's like campaign rally stuff from a few weeks ago. That's hilarious. It's crazy though because they are very diehard Slack folks out there, and it's interesting
There are.
because when I first did Teams, I was like, man, Slack's way better at chat, right? Like Slack's way better at chat. That's what I thought. And then you finally get to use Teams, and you kind of realize that the overall ecosystem is really what makes like Teams just killer, right? Like once
100%.
everybody's in there, and that's what just really makes Teams the useful tool that is. Speaking of useful tools, are you using anything like Power Automate, Copilot Studios, any of those things? Does that just come along with it as a natural progression in terms of administering services and forms? So forms, Power Automate, and Copilot Studios. Any of those things?
For what type of functions?
Anything
So
from an
yeah.
automation
So I
perspective?
mean, yeah. So not yet. I mean, sure, we do forms for. I've built some forms for like call queue intakes. So like if somebody needs a call queue, it's a lot easier for me to build a form and like translate the technical language to the end user language, have them fill out this form, and then that triggers off like a Power Automate to where it generates an as-built guide, and then it opens up a ticket to create the actual call queue, right, and or auto attendant. So yeah, definitely have been using that for some of these administrative tasks to help automate those. Forms, always use those for just general feedback and whatnot. um and then yeah, I think that's it for me. I haven't dove into the Copilot Studio yet, but it's on my long backlog of things to start looking into.
I was just thinking as we were talking about the surveys, right? And I was thinking about if you did have a survey that goes out and there was something that came back, a variable that comes back with, no, I didn't get this, so automatically how that would kick off a flow to then send that user instructions on how to get their information, right? Like, and that just all automated, right? Like, I think that's pretty exciting stuff. Again, from a business owner or business, that kind of like, departmental ownership stuff. I'm like, man, that's some cool stuff. Brandon, anything else, Brandon? I know we're hitting pretty close to the end of the time here.
I was just going to touch on the Copilot piece because it'll be interesting and maybe fun to catch up with you. I know we got one more episode coming for the 5-part series, but then, down the road a ways, it'd be fun to catch up with you on the Copilot piece, especially around the optimize for voice settings for Copilot, where you can start to create, maybe IVR flows that are a little more
I'm super
AI generated.
Yeah, that's going to be really exciting. Yeah.
And it then goes back to that may change in some ways how you design call queues and auto attendants in the future, depending on what the application and use case is, because maybe as you take in that survey, that form of, hey, I want this auto attendant call queue, it may change into, hey, what you're asking for can be solved with a Copilot. And so it'd be interesting to catch up with you down the road on that topic.
And that's episode 5, essentially. That's going to be discussion on, advanced features, Copilot Studios, Copilot, any of the Power Automate stuff. Like, it's going to be touching on all those things. We're going to lump mobile into that, Matt. Next episode, we want to lump mobile in there. Get your thoughts on mobile, whether it be Teams Phone mobile or bring your own device sort of mobile deployments. And so that's all part of our very last episode on how to put the cherry on top of your smooth deployment. So that's going to be the last episode for us. Not the last episode, Matt, but the last in this particular series. It's been great having you on here. Just so much insightful information for large organizations looking to migrate to Microsoft Teams. And we'll kind of, I think, summarize next call with, all right, what are those gotchas? And basically, what the hell are you waiting for? Like, you just got to do something like this. This is, totally. Something like that. So your endorsement essentially of Microsoft Teams as a solution, I think, is what we'll finalize with on the next episode. But
I heard Rick's going to send you a stamp, a Microsoft Teams logo stamp, and you're going to show up on episode 5 with that stamp right on your forehead.
Is that coming in with the jacket that I'm getting too, or
that's the one that I've got, right? No.
Oh my goodness! And on that,
the SNL 5-timers jacket.
That's right. That's hilarious. All right. Well, listen, Matt, thank you for episode 4. I think that was super helpful information for organizations, again, looking to migrate into Microsoft Teams. The call quality dashboards, the site, Brandon will have to help me with that, but the site network sort of testing thingamabobber, all this stuff is just valuable stuff for these organizations to understand the tools that are at their fingertips when deploying a solution. It is fear alone that is holding some people back from migrating to a solution like this. And there should not be fear, because just past that door of fear is lots and lots of success. Matt, you've done it 3 times, and it's a pleasure to hear your stories and your tips on deployment. So with that, Brandon, why don't you take us out, buddy?
Yeah, I'm going to wish everyone a happy Thanksgiving. I think we'll be off next Friday. So you'll have to catch Matt on the wrap up the week after, I believe, Thanksgiving. So Rick, we will definitely have to do a really good job of recapping what the first 4 episodes have been, and looking forward to catching up with you, Matt, after the holidays. Everyone else, have a happy Thanksgiving, and thanks for tuning in.